Welcome to another coding tutorial, and in today's video I'm going to show you how we can use a simple arc function to create this cool typography. First things first, let's talk about the arc function. So the arc function takes in a total of 6 arguments. The first 2 are the x and y location of your arc's ellipse or your arc circle. Then the third and the fourth are going to be the width and the height. And then the fifth and the sixth are going to be the starting angle and then the ending angle of your arc. So arc, and then I'm going to draw my arc in the center of my canvas. So it's going to be width divided by 2 and then height divided by 2. And then let's give it a size of 150, and I'm going to draw it from 0 to 180. And because I'm giving the angle arguments in degrees, right, 0 to 180, I also need to, in setup, set the new angle mode to degrees. So actually in p5.js, you can use either the degrees mode or the radians mode, where the radians mode is the default mode, so you don't have to actually set the mode to radians. We're not going to get into the difference between the two in this video, but if you want to use degrees, you need to make sure that you write this line of code. All right, let's run. Okay, so as you can see here, we have drawn an arc from angle 0 to angle 180, and how the arc is drawn is in the clockwise direction. So if we were to draw 90, all right, so you can just change it based on your liking. And if you don't want the filling of this white color, you can also set it to no fill, which is what I want. So once we understand how an arc function works, now I want to create a class called arc, and I'm gonna basically just write this line of code in there so that we can create a bunch of arc objects on our canvas. So you can come here, click this plus button, and then click create file, and then I'm going to name it arc.js. And then before you write the class, let's go to index.html file here, and then copy and paste this line of code and change the name sketch to whatever you name your file. And this is how you integrate a new JavaScript file into your program. All right, let's go back to arc.js. So start by writing the word class, and then I'm going to name my class arc. In the constructor function, I'm going to give it 3 parameters, x, y, and d, which is the size. And then in here, we're going to set this dot x equals to x, this dot y equals to y, and this dot d equals to d. And I'm going to write a method called display. And display basically is going to display the arc, and then we can just use the code that we have written here and paste it down here. We have to tweak slightly. So instead of width divided by 2 and height divided by 2, we want to change it to this dot x and this dot y. And the size here is going to be this dot d, this dot d. Instead of hard coding 0 and 270 here, what I want to do is that I want to also set 2 more variables called this dot start and this dot stop. And I'm going to just give it a constant values of 0 and 270 for now, and we can change it later on. And then we need to make sure that we change the number here as well. All right, so let's just start from here and go back to our sketch file and just make sure that our code is correct. So I'm going to create an object. I'm going to call it A, and then A is going to be a new arc object, right? And I'm going to draw it exactly where we have drawn it here, which is going to be at width divided by 2 and height divided by 2. And then the size is going to be 150. And then we are going to start, oh, actually, the start and stopping angles are already at 0 and 270. So we also need to write a.display here to call the display method. Nothing has changed because we have done the exact same thing in our class. So to make it more interesting, what about instead of hard coding the number 0 and 270 here, we're also going to give start and stop variables here as our parameter. Okay, so if we come back to sketch.js and we give it, let's say 0 and 90. All right, so now it works as we want it. Instead of just drawing one arc in the center of our canvas, what we want to do is that we actually want to create rows and columns of arcs. And we can do that by first creating a 2D array. And I'm going to name my 2D array arcs. And you can declare a 2D array first by just declaring a variable as a type array. And then I want to create 3 more variables. The first one is columns, second one is rows, and then the last one is size. And I'm going to give a size of 50 pixels. And before we start creating a 2D array, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to calculate the number of columns and rows by dividing width by size and height by size. And then to create a 2D array, we are going to write a nested for loop. We're going to loop through the number of columns and the number of rows. I have done many tutorials on 2D arrays and nested for loops, so you can check those out if you're not familiar. In the outer for loop, first we're going to populate our arc array with empty 1D arrays. And in the inner loop, we're going to create a bunch of new arc objects, and we're basically going to copy this line of code. And instead of setting it at width divided by 2 and height divided by 2, we're going to set it at where each of the grid is going to be, right? And then we can delete this line of code, and also we can delete this as well. All right, so the size is not going to be 150. It's going to be the value in our variable size. And then what if we just do 0 to 90 for now for all of them? So actually, instead of drawing everything in the draw function, I am going to call the display function in this nested for loop here, because we're drawing a static image, so we don't need the computer to keep calling it under the draw function. We only need to call it once under setup. I'm going to put background here, and then we're gonna call display, but instead of just A, we need to call all the objects in the 2D array. Okay, let's try this. All right, I forget the word new, and also I think this angle mode will have to be up here. All right, so now we have a bunch of arcs that starts from angle 0 to angle 90, but I actually want to shift it a little bit to the right and a little bit down. And we are going to add this offset here of size divided by 2 and size divided by 2. All right, so just to give you a sense of why I did that, if we were to draw a circle, it fits within each of the grids. Now, instead of actually just giving it all the values of 0 to 360 or whatever the angle values we want, I actually want to give it a random values. And I want to give it a random angle value between 0 and 360. All right. Now it looks more interesting. Next, what we're going to do is that we are going to import an image. An image that I'm going to import is going to be an image of a letter A. And what we're going to do is that we're going to extract the brightness value of that image, and then we're going to set the stroke weight based on the brightness value of that image. That's what we're going to do next. Come here, and then you're going to want to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it images. And then you're going to want to upload your image. You can just drag your file into the upload file here. The next thing that we want to do is that we want to prep our image. So first, you need to declare a variable. I'm going to call it img for image. And then I'm going to use a function called preload. Preload is basically just preloading your file. And what you need to do is that you need to set the variable that you're gonna set the image file into, and then you're gonna use the function called preload. And then inside this, you're gonna give an argument, and the argument is gonna be where you keep your file. And you have kept your file in the folder called images, and then the file is called a.png. So what you need to do is that first just do the, not quotation mark, but just this one mark, and then put the name of where your source file is in. So it's in the folder called images, then do a backslash, and then the name of your file. So a.png. So don't forget to also put the ending here, PNG or JPEG or however your file is prepped. So I am just going to click run just to make sure that nothing is... instead of preload here, it actually is load image. All right, so it works, but I haven't tried to display the image or anything like that. So why don't we do that in here? So you just need to call the function called image, and then the name of your file, and then the location of where you want to put the left corner of your image. So I'm going to do it at 0, 0. All right, so actually my file is the exact size of the canvas, which is at 400 by 400 pixels. But if your file is larger and you want to resize it, all you need to do is that you write the name of your file and then use the function called resize, and you will want to resize to whatever the size that you want. Let's say I want it to be half of my width, so I could do width divided by 2. And then if you don't want to set what the height is going to be, you want it to proportionately resize, so you can just put in 0. Let's try that. Okay, and then as you can see here, it is sized at the width that is half of what it was, and then the height, because I put in 0, it is automatically where it is proportionately. All right, so I don't want to resize this, so I'm gonna comment it out. Also, I actually don't need to display the image also. What we want to do is that we want to extract the brightness value of the image A that you saw previously. So inside this nested for loop, in the inner loop, what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna create a new variable, and I'm gonna call it C for color. So first I want to extract the color, and what we can do is that we can use the function called get, and how we're gonna do it is that you're gonna put in the name of your file and then dot and then get. And then the arguments that you're gonna put in is that you're gonna try to get the color value of a specific pixel in your canvas. So let me redraw this image here. So now, actually, our image now is going to be sliced into grids. What it's going to do is that I'm going to pick a color value that is inside the grid. So it's not actually an average of the value in that grid, but it's actually is a point within the grid that we're going to pick. So what we're going to put into the argument here is going to be I times size and J times size. Right? So it's going to be the top left corner of each of our grid. All right. So once we have this, I'm going to show you by printing this out. So because our image only has 2 colors, right? It has white and black. So if we print this out, you can see here that it gives us a value of either white, so 255, 255, 255. And the last value here is the transparency, right? We also have the color black, which is 0, 0, 0. All right, so that's to be expected. But actually, instead of just getting the color value, I actually only want the brightness value of each of these points. So we can use the function brightness and then put in the argument of that specific color. So if I click play here, then you can see that it ranges between 0 and 100. And I believe that 0 is white and 100 is black. But let's see. Okay, so once we have this, right? We have the values from 0 to 100. Initially, what we said is that we want to set the arc's stroke weight to be based on the brightness of our image. I am going to set a new variable called b, and b is going to be mapped from 0 to 100 to the stroke weight of, let's do, how about 0 to 5. And I am going to go back to the arc class here and then create a new variable called stroke size here. And then we're gonna put stroke weight to be what the stroke size is going to be here. All right, and then if we go back to sketch.js, we need to add another argument here, and then we're gonna set this b. All right, let's try this. Map was expecting a number. See, oh, okay, it needs to be brightness here, right? All right, so everything is very dark here, and you can see that there is a shape of A slightly here. And I think it's because white is 0 and black is 100. So, no, I think it's the other way around. So 0, because where you don't see anything here, it's a stroke weight of 0, which is black. So what if we do the opposite way? You can see the shape A here. You can see that it's like shifted out a little bit, and I think it is because, let me just like change this to 20. I think it's because I'm extracting it from the top left corner. What if, and like we draw it slightly with an offset of size divided by 2. Then if we were to extract this at the right location and then draw it at the same location, now you can see that the A shape is where the image is supposed to be. All right, so this is kind of cool. So you can play around with this already, right? First, you know, you can, if instead of just setting the color white to 0, the color white to 0, what if we set it to 1? You can see that there's some more stuff in the background, which is a different aesthetic, which is kind of cool too. Also, you can play around with the size of your grid here, right, to get the kind of look that you want. But if you want it to be more abstract, and this is very abstract, you can't see anything, but play around. The next thing that I want to do is I want to give it a bit of color. So if we go back to the art class here, I'm going to set a new variable called C, and C is going to be for color. And I'm going to actually try to get a random number between 0 and 7. And then I'm going to use the function floor here to get a value between 0 and 6, right? Because random function actually generates random values between 0 and the argument that you put in, but not including this. So you will never get 7. You will get up to 6.9999. And then after that, I actually have an array called art color. And art color basically has a color palette that I want to use, and there are a total of 7 colors in there. So let me find that. Ta-da! We're going to set the stroke color to one of the color inside this arc function, right? This arc color array. And I'm going to use this random number that we generate at the start of creating an object, and set that color as a stroke color. So let's try this. Alrighty. And the last thing that I want to do is that I want to set the background color to be something less gloomy. And there you go. Let's give this a smaller size so that you can see the A. But actually the one that I like the most is when you don't see anything in the background and it's a little bit abstract. This is probably my favorite, but you can play around. There's so much that you can do with this. There are a lot of different kinds of images that you can play around. With this image that I used, it's just black and white, right? So it's pretty high contrast. But what if you use a different image that has a range of different colors? That would be interesting too. So give it a try.